the moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerf Herder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Mike Mjolnir Evans. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
Welcome back to TMI, and you are listening to our second bucket list episode.
Woo! Wow, we're cranking through these, baby.
Yeah, I know. If you listened to last week's, you heard us talk all about Star Wars. This week,
Star Wars. What is this movie we're talking about?
Go listen to last week's episode, and you'll
okay.
understand.
All right. Awesome.
We're moving up 8 years into the future from 1977.
Ooh, nice segue.
Moving to 1985. This film opened on July 4th weekend, 1985. Same week that Live Aid happened. That's a big week right there. Yeah, the infamous Queen performance that we lauded so greatly a few weeks ago and from Bohemian Rhapsody happened the week that this movie opened. And we're talking about Back to the Future.
If only Marty and Doc zoomed in there, that'd be cool.
Yeah. So these movies, I don't think we really need to go into the plot. These are beloved.
If you're listening, you know what.
You really need to know what these movies are about. The purpose of these bucket list episodes are really just to talk about our memories of each of these movies.
Memories.
Yeah. These are movies that shaped our childhood, as Jeff so eloquently explained last week in the Star Wars episode. And this is just another one of those. Again, Star Wars really started a blockbuster culture in the late 70s, early to mid 80s, where you're getting a huge movie and a quality movie every year. A classic movie.
Sometimes
eons.
Numerous.
Year. Sometimes you got more than one in a year.
Well, if anybody wants to listen to our 1982 reference.
Yeah. We had Poltergeist. We had E.T. We had Blade
Conan the Barbarian. Yeah.
85 was Back to the Future. I think that was the big movie of the year. It was the box office champ of the year, at least. And also the first big breakout film role for Michael J. Fox, who was known for playing Alex P. Keaton
in Family Ties. He was at the height of his popularity on that show, as a matter of fact.
As a TV star. He was in uncharted territory here as a film star, but he
almost wasn't.
Marty McFly to the hills.
Well, we all know that he was not originally. The studio wanted him, and they
wanted him first of all. Yes,
but he could not get out of his NBC contract with Family Ties. So they turned to another actor and filmed for a few weeks. And then one day a studio exec turned around after watching some dailies and said, "Is this supposed to be funny?" Which is like the kiss of death. Oh, so Eric Stoltz, poor Eric Stoltz. Well, it doesn't matter what he did after this, which was nothing. But he actually filmed as Marty McFly. And if you have the 25th anniversary DVD,
scenes are there. Yeah.
Scenes. And they shot a lot. Like I said, that's a couple weeks worth of filming before they realized that this is not working. And so they worked with NBC and were able to acquire Michael J. Fox. And so he would shoot a full day on the Family Ties set and then go at night and work on this movie. So he was burning the candle at both ends there.
And I think it was a good choice on his part to go ahead and do that, because this, again, is a classic for the ages. Well-deserved of our 5 bucket. I think all 3 of us would agree that this is a 5 bucket.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is your favorite, isn't it, Jeff, of all movies?
Jeff especially loves this movie.
Yeah, I will say that, Star Wars, near and dear, but Back to the Future is just one of those movies that has entrenched in everything. Anytime it's on, I'll watch it. It's just, I tried to get my daughter and her friends to watch this a couple years ago. She had friends over or whatever, and they're hanging out. Hey, you guys want to watch a movie? You guys want to watch this movie, Back to the Future? When did it come out? 1985. And her friend immediately said, "No, thanks. I do not like black and white movies."
Oh.
And then, so we watched it, and there was really no reaction. But I think the next time she was at my house and the idea of watching a movie, she goes, "Please don't make me watch that movie again." She goes, "It was bad."
So why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
That's terrible.
It is terrible, but that's,
How can you not like this movie?
I don't know. So, you can't please everybody, but this movie to me is absolutely perfect from beginning to end. You cannot point out a single flaw in this movie to me. You could try, but
I'm not going to try. I was just racing right now.
No.
Can I point something out? No, I don't think so. But again, like Star Wars, apparently almost didn't get made. Zemeckis, and who's the other guy that wrote it with Zemeckis? His name is escaping me now. But they were shopping it around the studios. I think Disney again was another studio that they brought it to that turned it down because they didn't want the subject matter of a mother falling in love with her son. They thought that was there's definitely some weird stuff going on with this movie. You do know that the time machine at one point was a refrigerator. Yes. And they thought that kids might mimic that.
They did not go down that road.
But apparently Spielberg, the producer, brought that idea back for Indiana Jones.
Well, if only he had time traveled back to the beginning of the movie and said, "Oh, we're not doing this."
Hence the phrase "jump the refrigerator."
Yeah, nuke the fridge.
Nuke the fridge.
Yeah.
Is it nuke the fridge or jump the fridge?
Nuke the fridge is really the kind of vernacular.
I see. Okay. So memories, first time you seen it?
Definitely was July of that summer. And it was one of those movies that I had no clue about. It wasn't growing up with 2 TV channels. You weren't really exposed to a lot of pop culture stuff going on. And I was knee deep in Starlog by then. So Starlog was a sci-fi magazine that came out, and it was all about, the science fiction. I do not remember even seeing a trailer for this movie.
Yeah, just going off on a tangent there. Magazines like Starlog, Fantastic Films, Famous Monsters. These were the DVD bonus features of the 70s and 80s.
Of the day, yeah.
Yeah, this is what gave us intel about the making of these movies, about deleted scenes that you never got to see,
right?
But were talked about in these articles.
Yeah. Yep. And you would see years later on the DVD. That's so funny you mentioned that, because the cut scene in Alien sticks with me, because I remember they had a picture. There was a black and white picture
of Dallas. Right?
Yes, Dallas up on the wall when Ripley finds them. Yep, not in the movie. So
the importance of those magazines could not be underestimated for kids growing up in the 70s and 80s.
And it was always excited to go to the newsstand and see what's on the cover.
Yeah.
So
continue, Jeff. I'm sorry.
That looks awesome.
Yeah. I'm sorry for interrupting. Continue with you.
No, you're right. That's fine. July, it had to have been that summer. And it came at the recommendation of my art teacher at the time, who saw it and was like, "You need to go see this movie. You're going to love it." Okay. All right. So I think my cousins were in from Ohio, and we went. And my older cousin, Kimmy, was old enough to drive. And I don't remember specifically walking out of the theater thinking that was the best thing I've ever seen, but it's just been subsequent viewings, and you really, once you start going down the time travel roads, there's all these nitpicky stuff. And if you watch this movie, he actually changes his future. He changes what happens by going into the past. But you're right, Jim. The idea that his mother's got the hots for him is really kind of a creepy. And what's even weirder is that this came out in 85 and he time travels back to 55. So it was only a 30-year difference.
Yes.
And there's a point in my life where I'm at the point where if I went back now, it would be the same amount of time going back to my mom 30 years. And it was just that's weird.
But she was hot. Mom was hot.
Well, she's still hot. Not my mom. We're talking about...
We're talking about Marty's mom.
Yes, we are talking about...
played by Leah Thompson, who later became Caroline in the City. I think that was her only other big role. That
Howard
sitcom
the Duck.
on
How dare you not bring up Howard the Duck?
Some Kind of Wonderful?
Yes. But Doc Brown, all-time favorite character, to the point where I probably went a little too far to look like a mad scientist with my hair.
The 1.21 gigawatts of electricity.
1.21 gigawatts! 1.21 gigawatts! Great Scott!
But yes.
So, Mike, what your memories of the first viewing of Back to the Future?
Similar to, I don't know why. I mean, we probably went to the movies almost every week during the summer because it was something to do. Kind of stumbled into this thing and loved it. I really liked, kind of the flavor of the story because it captures like 1985, which is where you're sitting. And it also sort of captures like that 1950s coming of age sort of high school thing. So you're getting like, I was in high school and you're getting high school today and you're getting high school in 1955 and the plot, the characters, the twists, it was just a massively enjoyable film.
Yeah, I will agree. I saw it at the Juliet Theater in downtown Poughkeepsie, New York. It was long since defunct 4-screen theater in the middle of town. And that's where all the big movies played, be it Empire, Raiders, E.T., the whole cavalcade of 80s films. And this was just one of them that I saw there. I remember my aunt went with me, who was only probably 5-6 years older than I am. Both loved it. I knew Michael J. Fox well from the TV show because I watched Ties every week. So I identified
we all did, yeah,
immediately and thought he was great in this movie. Although really, I don't think he's been able to live it down. His film career after was really, I think you kind of judged him by Back to the Future, which was a little bit unfair.
Well, I mean, there's certain actors that they are their character. It doesn't matter who they play. Like if you watch, Secret of My Success, or maybe not so much the one with Joan Jett, that's a little darker. Yeah. But he really just plays the same character.
You know what one I loved, actually? I just remembered it, was the one with James Woods, The Hard Way.
Oh, yes, where he's the
movie star.
Actor.
And yeah.
He's the actor, yeah, and he's following the cop. I will tell you, I was working in Times Square. That was probably 89. I was working in Manhattan at the time, and there's a scene where the premiere of the movie that he's shadowing James Wood, who's a real cop, is premiering, and they had this a giant Michael J. Fox head up on, it was like a paper mache thing, and he's got a cigarette in his mouth, and it's animated, and there's smoke coming out, and it was up in Times Square because they'd filmed a scene earlier there, and I do remember that. That's about the only thing I remember from that movie was that giant prop. I have a photo of it somewhere.
Oh, Jeff, there is actually one thing I could find fault with in this movie.
Go ahead.
That I could challenge you.
Okay,
that Marty McFly in his room has a poster
of Huey Lewis.
And any kid that's cool, even in 1985, I don't think would have a poster of Huey Lewis up in his.
Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, I was the biggest Huey Lewis in the News fan.
Oh no!
So there's like double dipping, and Huey Lewis has a cameo in this movie
as well,
which
is ridiculous because
it just tickled me to no end.
If you look at Huey Lewis now,
you're too loud, boys. You're just too loud.
But this is funny. If you look at Huey Lewis now, like back then, even then he was like 40 in a band, like way older than he should have been. Being as successful as he was, and how he's playing a dork as if it's supposed to be ironic. He was kind of a dork, Oh,
wow. We'll agree to disagree on that one.
Okay.
That's called the product placement.
Yeah.
Because he did. I mean, listen, Power of Love. Back in
Power
time,
of Love is
two of the most iconic.
That is a great song.
Movies soundtrack. So, it's just, the DeLorean, again, you talk about the Millennium Falcon and how iconic it is. That DeLorean is just, right. If it was a refrigerator, it wouldn't work. It's a character. And it's a much loved character. I remember, again, working in Manhattan when the third one came out. Times Square was still a cesspool. It was just a nightmare. And there was a theater that was running all three movies. And they actually gave away these buttons. I saw the future back to back to back. And I don't remember, it might have been January 90 or whatever. And I go there from work. I walk to Times Square all by myself. There were multiple people with DeLoreans tricked out. This was back before like Comic-Con was a big thing and people actually made their cars or made their, look like the props. In Times Square, these DeLoreans. And it was just, such an iconic car that I've always wanted one. I'll never get one.
Yeah,
even like in the movie, Marty's like surprised. You built a time machine out of a DeLorean,
right?
And you're like, yeah, that's like odd.
Well, it was the stainless steel that was able to.
And Jeff, you probably know the story, but I heard that they picked the DeLorean because it was the car that looked most like a spaceship. So they could have that joke in the beginning where when he lands in the barn.
And Mr. Peabody's farm,
Yeah.
And the doors open up and the artwork on the poster, because he's wearing the nuclear hazmat suit.
Right.
It's funny because, so when he first meets Doc that night, which is, it's a weird, like, you got to step back and think, what kind of relationship did they really have that he's like hanging out with this old professor doctor who's, for lack of a better term, was like a crazy man. And I don't know, Marty's parents didn't really care one way or the other.
They didn't really, there was no scene that connected those two worlds of Marty. The parents never commented on the Doc, and they just didn't connect until... Yeah,
I don't think even they ever mentioned him.
Yeah, no, they didn't.
Right. So, and obviously this plays into what happens in the past, which is when he gets to the mall, it's the Twin Pines Mall. And then when he's transported back to 1955 in Mr. Peabody. So he's in the same area, because at one point, Doc even says, years ago, just nothing but farmland. Some old man Peabody was crazy about making pine trees. So he sets the stage, and as Marty's escaping from the barn, he runs over one of the pine trees. Mm-hmm. There's two pine trees next to the mailbox. My pine tree! As he's shooting a friggin' loaded shotgun at him. And when he goes back in time, it's now the Lone Pine Mall. So he has created...
I did not catch that.
What?
No, I did not. Okay. I was too worked up in the, in the drama that's going on.
So here's my question to you. So based on this logic, and in the second and third ones, they get into it a little bit more, which is, for whatever reason, when they originally go back to 1955, it creates a divergent timeline. So in the second one, we have where Biff has the almanac, and he's now this billionaire, for lack of a better term, Trump. He's now Trump in charge of the world, and he's a douchebag. And so they realize that that's kind of like this nexus. So at the end of Back to the Future, Marty comes back to the future. And again, it's now been altered because his parents don't kiss exactly when they need to kiss. I mean, he forces George to stand up and basically,
Yeah, what a great scene that is, though, when George finally, all the anger that's built up in him is one of the best scenes of its kind, I think, with Crispin Glover, when you see that fist
and he's great
curl up.
Yeah. But in the second one, when they go back into the first movie, you see that the boys actually spike the punch. So now you have to ask it, because he takes a big swig before he goes out to confront Biff. So you're like, all right, so he got a little liquid courage in him, because he now just drinks some alcohol. So they kind of played with that as well. But you've now got a divergent timeline, which is his dad, who never amounted to anything. His brother and sister were worthless. We're losers, for lack of a better term. Mom was a drunk. And now he goes back, and his dad's successful writer. Why? Because he was visited by Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan and convinced him that, right? And he writes the book. Yeah. And the book cover is Marty in the spacesuit.
In that suit, yeah.
Uniting to a couple, and I guess it took them years to get this book published or whatever, but they're thriving. The brother has a job or whatever. So my question is, what happened to the Marty from that timeline? There was a Marty that existed where his parents were always like that. He's now replaced that Marty. See, this is where time travel.
No, he's still the same Marty. He's from that timeline.
He's not from that timeline. He changed
that timeline and is in the new
timeline. No, if you follow Doc Brown's assumption that they've now created an alternate timeline, a divergent timeline. He didn't go back to where he didn't go back to his 1985 where his parents were still losers. He changed that.
So he is replaced
now the single plane mall. He actually, yes.
So if Marty existed in that new timeline before he returned,
he would have to at some point.
So he would have had to replace him.
Yes, exactly, is my point. So what happened to that Marty? What happened to that Marty who always knew his parents were put together and Biff was a loser?
But isn't the point that he's created a new reality and not an alternate reality?
But somewhere between those time jumps, a Marty had to exist in there to live out that life leading up to that moment where he comes back. I
don't think Zemeckis really... I don't think he accounted for this.
You're saying that you have an issue with the movie, Jeff.
No,
Yes.
I don't. I'm simply asking a question. I just it doesn't diminish my enjoyment of the movie whatsoever. It just adds to it the idea that there could very well be another Marty out there.
Let me bring up some things that I noticed on
Okay.
this viewing that I didn't.
So
really
you just
think
watch
about.
this. This is I mean, I've seen this enough times that I can talk through it, but you just rewatch this.
Yes, and I
Okay.
probably haven't seen this since maybe late 80s, early 90s.
Were you shocked at the amount of swearing and cursing that goes on in this movie?
And I was watching it with my son, and I was a little
there's a lot
uncomfortable.
of what's the matter, Doctor? We become assholes. Like there's a lot of cursing going on in this as well, and it wasn't even PG-13 back then, right? Was it?
Right, it was just PG.
PG.
I think the rating existed PG-13, but they gave it a PG.
Yeah, I think Red Dawn kind of set the tone for
Yeah.
that, but in the end,
But because we're just coming off the Christmas season here as we record this, I watched Gremlins not too long ago, and I found there was something a little bit familiar about that
and
town.
this blows me away because I did not know this.
Yeah, of the town of Kingston Falls in Gremlins is actually the same movie set that they used for Hill Valley in Back to the Future. They just redressed it.
Wild.
They have it in two different timelines in Back to the Future. They redressed it for both than
Right.
when it looked like in Gremlins. But if you look at that movie theater in Back to the Future, it is the same marquee with a
Wow.
different movie
With the Atomic Kid.
from Gremlins. Yeah. And the whole
I have to go and look at that now because I have
Yeah.
not seen Gremlins in quite some time. And
And-
Gremlins is a pretty dark movie.
it is. It completely is. But I watched Gremlins, and not having seen Back to the Future for many years, just something was eating at me like,
Yeah,
that.
you're like,
This
"Oh,
looks
yeah."
familiar. This set.
That's pretty wild.
Mostly because I think because of the park in the middle of the set, that's
Okay,
what
right.
did it. That's
Yeah.
what
Times
really.
Square. You got the nice
Yeah.
clock.
And
Save the
also-
clock tower.
Marty's grandmother that he goes over when he goes back in time, he goes over to dinner at his mother's house, and so his
Oh, yes.
grandmother is serving him dinner.
Yeah.
Is the mom from Gremlins?
What?
Yeah, she's the one that cooks the gremlin in the microwave. Get
Oh,
out of my house.
wow.
Yeah.
That's.
See,
you
it
just
all-
blew my
it's
mind.
all
You
together.
blew my mind.
You're going deep.
And no,
That
this is going to be even deeper. This is going to be even deeper. Get this. The redhead that tries to cut in between George and Lorraine at the end. during
Okay.
the prom,
Yep.
That's Malachi from Children of the Corn.
Malachi! He wants you too, Malachi.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, now this is really going off on a tangent, but back in high school, when we used to have study period, I would bring in VHS movies, and I started a movie club once a week in the library.
I'm shocked, Jim.
About 5 or 6 of us would watch, half of a movie, then the next week we would finish it.
Watch the other half.
And Back to the Future was one of the ones that I brought in. So when that scene came up and the guy tried to cut in drunkenly, everybody shouted, Malachi, Malachi.
He who walks between the rows.
So yeah, there you go.
Wow. I did not know that. Charlie Fleischer, who actually went on to play Roger Rabbit, is one of Biff's buddy henchmen with the 3D glasses on.
Really?
I don't think he has any dialogue, but that is
Wow.
him.
So yeah, and I always thought that this was a very It's a Wonderful Life-esque.
It is.
Movie
It is
as
very
well.
much so. Right. Yes. Yeah. But all the groundwork is there. Everything that established that needs for Marty to get back is there, and it's a very put together movie.
Now let's talk about merchandising for this. I don't remember a lot of it coming
There
out for the
really
release of this
isn't,
movie.
I don't think.
Dr. Emmett L. Brown here. Through the wonder of video spectronomy, I'm recording an amazing phenomenon. McDonald's Back to the Future Hamburger Happy Meal for $1.99. Analysis shows it comes with one of 4 toys, like Marty McFly, some old guy in my DeLorean. Holy bovine, is he familiar. Switching to X-ray mode reveals 1 toy each week when you buy your kids a $1.99 McDonald's Happy Meal. Perhaps I should forgo further documentations and just have lunch.
What you want is what you get at McDonald's today.
Although, admittedly, I think we were all pretty much past the age of where we would be interested in getting any of
But
the
I don't really
toys.
remember any. I mean, there might have been like models of the DeLorean. Years later, Nike went out of their way to create a replica of the shoes that he wears in the second movie, the self-sealing ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there was a cartoon that came out, but that was about it.
But we
And
did
even that, I
have,
think the cartoon did not come out until after the third one because I had Jules and Vern, Doc Brown's children from the end of.
Oh. But
So-
we did have the Universal theme park ride.
We did, which was pretty awesome at the time.
Now that you're here, time travel volunteers, I can give you your pre-flight briefing. There's a lot you'll need to know if you're to successfully cross the space-time continuum.
But let me tell you, that ride was probably the most punishing ride.
That was your
imagine.
Your
no cushion.
No.
If you were free of neck and back problems, you weren't after the ride was finished.
And even then, that wasn't until after the third movie because they had the train in the front. The train was in the front
I think maybe that came to be in either 90, 91, 92, early 90s.
Right.
I think that ride originated from.
Yeah. But you did get the video of Doc Brown leading you when you were waiting in the queue. Yes. There was a video of Doc Brown and he would talk to you.
Yeah.
And I think he did the same thing in the cartoon as well. Like he would show up as character and kind of either walk you through a science experiment or, again, I was much older, but I did have the comics, the Back to the Future cartoon comics. So
they also had a full-size DeLorean outside the ride that you could take your picture with by the Back to the Future gift shop, I remember.
Nice.
No longer there. It's now the Simpsons ride.
Simpsons ride, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, final thoughts on this guy, gentlemen?
Jeff, you've just got me flabbergasted here that, Marty is like locked in a closet somewhere in 1985. I'm trying to figure this out.
Yeah, I do remember there was a Starlog article that came out, and it was like it argued the premise that there was actually 3 Martys, and I don't remember ever being able to wrap my head around what it was that they were trying to explain. But the minute you start in with time travel and you start changing the past, it's a nice wrapped up story. Like Jim said, it's a wonderful life. It's and listen, Marty's life wasn't that bad to begin with. His parents were messed up and his siblings were jerks, but he still had a girlfriend.
He was kind of the shining star of the family.
Exactly. Yeah. Hello, McFly.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, and it's so quotable. There's so many lines.
Lorraine, my density has brought me to you.
Just so many lines in this movie, and he invents the skateboard by tearing off that scooter.
Yes.
Just little, the running joke through all 3 movies where Biff ends up with running into a manure truck. Just, I don't know. It tickles me to no end. I'm going to watch it today. I'm going to go, as soon as we're done with this, I'm going to watch it.
And of the classic 5 bucket films that I watched in the past 2 days for these episodes, being Star Wars, Empire, and Back to the Future, I think I enjoyed Back to the Future the most out of all 3.
The music is great as well. I believe it's Alan Silvestri did the music.
I think so.
The soundtrack that, and even, so go back to Ready Player One. My favorite part of that whole movie was he's driving the DeLorean, but in the trailer, at the very end of the trailer, you get those that little chime that comes in, whenever you see the DeLorean in Back to the Future or before he goes time traveling. There's these little 4 or 5 keys that they play that just become very iconic.
I would like to point out a story that I read about Ronald Reagan seeing this movie when he was president.
Okay.
One of his favorites, apparently, of
the
80s era films. And he asked a projectionist to stop and replay the joke that Doc Brown gives when Marty tells him that Ronald Reagan is the president.
Then tell me, future boy, who's president of the United States in 1985?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan? The actor? Then who's vice president? Jerry Lewis? I suppose Jane Wyman is the first lady.
Whoa, wait, Doc!
And Jack Benny is secretary of the Treasury.
So he had to watch that several times because he thought it was so funny.
Ronald Reagan, the actor?
Back to the Future, the #1 box office draw of 1985. Made on a $19 million budget. And that year, it made $389 million.
Damn, that's a lot. That's a big chunk of change.
Yeah.
And you know what? We didn't even really talk about Christopher Lloyd. I mean, Christopher Lloyd was coming off Taxi.
Yeah, that's what he was known for.
He had done Star Trek, was it 3, where he played the Klingon, and the minute he's on screen, everybody laughed. Yeah. I mean, he went on to play. What's his name in Roger Rabbit as well, the bad guy. Yeah, such an iconic character, such a great character. To be honest with you, I love it. That's it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well deserved. $5.
And 3's right up there as well. I still think that 3 is a much better movie than 2.
You know what? I have never seen 2 or 3 of Back to
Really? Well, 2's genius in the sense that they go back into the first movie. So now you're talking about multiple Martys. So they literally go back into the movie where he's crawling around in the background, and special effects don't hold up sometimes when you have 2 of the same character on screen. But
it's interesting to me that they waited until 1989 until that came out, that it didn't come out earlier than
they filmed a second and a third movie back to back, and they were released, I think, a year apart. And I do remember, again, working in the city, in the big movie posters that were in the subway tunnels, and the lead up of the DeLorean being dragged behind a sea of horses in the Old West. And even right in the first movie, Doc Brown makes a mention about always wanting to go back to the Old West. So even that kind of plays off.
So very, very happy to watch this again. And anybody that has not seen it yet, you're in for a treat.
Yeah, we just ruined it for you.
First viewing, yeah. But my son loved it. You know, he was...
Oh, awesome. Good.
He was very blasé about watching Star Wars and Empire again. Yeah. But as soon as Back to the Future came on, he sat there and was invested the whole time.
Very good. So. Good boy.
Yeah.
Teaching him right. Cool.
So next week, we're going back into the world of Lucasfilm and revisiting episode 5, Empire Strikes Back.
And boy, they strike back indeed.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
So, and this was going to be our final 5-bucket special show for January. And once we're done with that, we're going to go back into reviewing contemporary movies with Glass. So enjoy.
Very excited
while it
for
lasts.
that.
Yeah.
Super excited for that.
So thanks for listening again. Any comments? If you want to actually suggest a 5-bucket movie for us to talk about, remember our email address is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That's
you know someone's going to recommend The Godfather, and I've never seen it.
Oh. I'm typing the email now.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
They found me. I don't know how, but they found me. Run for it, Marty!
Who?